Yes, you can clap for that, Obi-Wan. Hey, good morning. Good to see you guys today. Hey, if you don't know me yet, my name's Chris. I'm one of the pastors here. I want to just add another thank you. Thank you guys so much for supporting us in prayer. It was just amazing to see what God did. Just to add a few things to what Ashton shared. Man, it was just so neat to be with Bethany Church again. And I asked Pastor Felipe, I was like, hey, do you think it was better for the leaders the first time or the second time? And he said the second time, and I was slightly surprised, not because this trip wasn't awesome, it was, but I felt like we were with the leaders a little bit more last time. And I said, why do you think it is that this was better than last time? And he simply said this: you came back. You came back. And I was like, and he said, because you came back, they really, really know now. It wasn't just a one and done to come help, that we really have a partner church in Southern California that's helping us. And we'll, as Ashton said, we'll go back next year. So please be praying about that if you're supposed to be a part of that. But I want to hone in on this story. This means a lot to all of us here. That person in the middle, her name is Isabella. And this story started last year, even though Isabella wasn't at Bethany Church at the time. Last year, we encouraged their leadership. Hey, so we're like, hey, you may want to, because they just meet in a building. How many of you know that when a church starts, they don't have a building to go to? A church starts with nothing when it's planted. And this church was planted 2 years ago, okay? So they're just in a building. It's not a church building, or it doesn't have their sign up like we have at OB1. And so the simplest encouragement, guys, it's such a God thing, okay? We're like, hey, you might want to get some signs so that people know that there's a church that meets in this building. So they actually followed through and got a couple signs like we encouraged them to do. Again, that was last year. Isabella, at some point this past year, was walking by this building, and she's like, I think I hear some music in this building. And then she starts listening, and she's like, I think it may even be church music, but I'm not sure. She's like, is there a church that meets there? And her mom was like, no, I think you're just hearing things. There's no church that meets there. But she kept hearing. She's like, there's got to be, because she's like, they're just probably playing music or something. So she's looking, and lo and behold, she sees this sign, which is so awesome that we encourage their church to get. Here's the other cool part of the story. When we were there last year teaching them about reaching people with Jesus' hope, we encouraged them like, hey guys, let's go on a prayer walk together. And we're going to pray over because one of the first things you need to do as you want to reach people and make an impact for God is you pray over your city. So we got into groups and started prayer walking. And there was a group that stopped at a condo and said, God, it'd be so cool if someone from this condo showed up to our church. Guess where Isabella lives? At that condo. And Isabella doesn't know about us because we were there last year before she came. We don't know about her. She just starts to share her story with us in the small group, and we're like, what? That is so crazy. And here's the kicker. She could have gotten baptized a month ago. She could have gotten baptized this weekend. She gets baptized on the exact week that we're with Bethany Church. It's amazing what God does. Yes, this is a God story here. So think about it. We encourage them to get a sign. They get a sign. She sees it, comes to Christ, and Christ changes her life. Guys, OB1, I know you're seeing 4 people that kind of went there, but this is our story. This is, if you're a part of OB1, this is your story too, and most importantly, it's a God story. So thank you again for all your support in the many ways that you have. It is awesome, and I hope that was awesome for you to hear. Isabella's life is changed, not only because of God and Bethany Church, but also because of OB1 Church. So thank you guys for being an awesome church. To get into the message, sometimes when given the option between A and Z, it's like, oh, what do I do? Guess what the answer is? Yes. It happens in finances. Save or spend. Yes. It happens with food. Dinner or dessert. Yes. Everybody nod your head at that one. It happens in relationships. Do I give in this relationship? Do I take in this relationship? Yes. This is what we refer to as both and, when two seemingly opposing concepts can both be true. Now, it can take some time to see how that can be true, as well as putting it into practice, walking the tension of both, but this is what we call the both and. And with this in mind, I want to talk about two ways that Jesus guides us to live that on the surface can seem at odds, but both are true. And when walked out in our faith journey, it can open a door for new discovery of freedom. How many of you want freedom today? I think all of us would raise our hands on that. So let's go to the Bible to see what these two ways to live are. We're going to look at two real-life stories, two interactions that Jesus had with people. Let me give context to the first one. Jesus was in conversation with someone, and they started to talk about the meaning of Christianity. And I think most of you would know what the meaning of Christianity is. They talked about loving God and loving your neighbor as yourself. And then the person asked Jesus, well, Jesus, who's my neighbor? And Jesus shares a story with the person to illustrate the answer to his question. He's like, one time there was this man, he was walking down a road, and robbers come along and beat him to a bloody pulp. They take everything from him. They even take his clothing. They leave him ready to die. He's been so badly beaten, they're leaving him on the side of the road ready to die. And then he talks about how two people I want you to think about this for a moment. Like, someone's dying. They're not just sitting on the road. They're just not walking on the road. Someone's dying. He's in desperate need, and two people just walk past them. That's the context of the story. We'll read the rest now in Luke 10. But remember that. Two people have already walked past this man that's on the brink of dying. And then it says this, but a Samaritan, as he traveled, came where the man was, and when he saw him, he took pity on him. Wow, that's so awesome. He went to him and bandaged his wounds, pouring on oil and wine. Then he put the man on his own donkey. You're starting to see the sacrifice that this person is making. He's sacrificing his time, sacrificing his resources, and he brought him to an inn and took care of him. The next day, now he's going into his money. The next day he took out 2 denarii and gave them to the innkeeper. Look after him, he said, and when I return, just in case it's more expensive than these 2 pieces of money that I've given you, I will reimburse you for any extra expense you may have. So after Jesus shares the story with the person, he asks the person, hey, who was the neighbor to the dying man? And the person said, it's kind of obvious, it's the one who had mercy, the one who helped. And Jesus revolutionized Christianity right after and said this, you're right, now go and do the same. Go and do the same. By encouraging them to do the same, Jesus was calling all of us to a faith that leads to action, that leads to love and compassion for others, that goes beyond words, and that does something even when others don't, that does something when 2 other people won't. He calls us to live a faith that goes beyond social barriers and norms. Now, you might not know this, but the person who Jesus shared the story with, he's a Jew, and the hero of the story is a Samaritan. You're like, PK, why does that matter? These two people groups hated each other. We're talking about a deep-seated hatred that they had for each other. The last person a Jew would have expected to be the hero of the story was a Samaritan. It would have been shocking to them. Jesus, why is he the hero of the story? See, Jesus makes it clear that his grace extends beyond lifestyle, political views, opinions, social norms, gender, age, or whatever barrier gets put up. Whatever barrier gets put up in a world where segregation is normal, where words don't always mean much, I want my followers to have a love and compassion produced within that busts through the barriers, that busts through the barriers of political views, that busts through the barriers of lifestyle. Get this one, that busts through, oh, you sin a little bit differently than me. So I get grace, you get judgment. I want my followers to live in a way that busts through the barriers and helps people where they are. He calls us to live a life where we're available and willing to be used to help others. You know, I like that this person was in their regular ongoings of their day when they helped. Sometimes I think we can miss out on helping others because we think of the big things like an Impact Brazil mission or an Impact Week. And to be clear, things like Impact Ministries are great and important things to do. But life, listen to this, life is typically lived through our regular ongoings. And that's what was happening with the Samaritan here. Let me give you a story that I think will help. Most of you won't know this, but I got this watch when I was in college. Now, I know that I still look like I'm 27 years old. Wow. I actually had someone today ask Rod Perry, he's like, you look the same as you did in your wedding photo. So anybody that's thinking I'm a little bit old, I'm just teasing. I'm not teasing about what Rod said, though. He did say that. I appreciated that with the laughter that just, I am teasing about that. That was over 2 decades ago. And so it's so amazing, this $79.99 watch, all I have to do is every once in a while is put a battery in it. So I go to the battery watch store and I put a battery in. And literally, it was just one of those moments, there was an elderly person behind me and I just felt God say to me, pay for whatever they need. I was like, hey, I just feel led to pay for the person behind me. How much does it cost? $8. I'm like, oh, thank God. It's like $8,000 grandfather clock, right? That's on the wall. So I was like, hey, I just feel led to pay for this person's, I don't even remember what it was, but it was $8, okay? And I was like, but don't tell the person. To say that someone, paid for it, but don't tell them who. So I walk away, but I still want to see the response. And he listened to me halfway because he did say that someone paid for her, but he also pointed me out. I was like, oh, but guys, it was so cool that happened. Here's why. Guys, you would have thought that I paid for the $8,000 grandfather clock. I literally paid $8 and she starts crying in front of me. And I'm not, this has nothing to do with this at all. I'm just showing you that when God allows us to think of others and we keep our hearts open, it can be in our regular ongoings to get a battery for our $79.99 watch. I think as I reflect, because I didn't talk to her a lot, but she thanked me, she hugged me, and like I said, it's like, wow, this really meant a lot to her for some reason. The only conclusion I can come to is this: someone thought of me. Someone thought of me. And guys, maybe for some of you, it's like, God, I want you to use me at work. I want you to use me at work in some way. Or, God, would you help me? Some need to start in the home. Would you help me to notice the needs in my home? Or some, maybe it's beyond the home. It's your place of hobby. God, would you help me to notice if someone needs your love and compassion at my place of hobby? Simply put, God, would you produce a love and a compassion within me that helps people where they are? I will be someone. My world doesn't often do it. Even some of the church doesn't do it. But I will be a Christ follower that busts through barriers to focus on others. One way Jesus wants us to live out our faith is to where we think of others and out of love and compassion, help serve others. Let's go to the other story now. It's really interesting, guys. It's found right after the Samaritan story, and Luke's gospel is in chronological order. So this would have happened after the Samaritan story. It's so cool that they are together. But it may seem opposing to how Jesus just encouraged us to live when he shared the Samaritan story. But again, think both ways to live are true. So a woman named Martha opened her home to Jesus, and she was doing many things to prepare for the evening. She was loving on, she was serving, she was helping others. It's just what Jesus had just talked about. And then she notices something. Wait a minute. I'm doing all the work. I'm doing all the serving. And my sister's just hanging out with Jesus. Martha gets upset. This is how upset she gets, okay? She goes to Jesus. She's like, do you care that I'm the only one working here, Jesus? You're not even working. Do you care that I'm the only one working here? Then she does this. Let's remember who Jesus is, the Son of God, the God of the universe, and she's bold enough to tell him what to do. Whew! And then she says this, Jesus, tell her to help me. How would he respond? Jesus had just shared a story that emphasizes a faith that thinks about and helps others. How would he respond? The God of the universe was just told what to do. So there's that too, right? Listen in to how he responds. It's really neat. Martha, the Lord answered, you are worried and upset about many things, but few things are needed, or indeed only one. Mary has chosen what is better, and it will not be taken from her. If Martha would have heard Jesus' story that he just shared about the Samaritan, she may have been confused. Wait a minute. You just got done teaching people. You just got done teaching us to love others by thinking about them, by serving them, by helping them. I'm doing that right now. But in this situation, even though she was thinking and helping others, he emphasizes rest and simply being with him. And through affirming Mary's choice, Jesus was calling all of us to a faith that leads us to slow down so we can be at rest and simply be with him. He calls us to a faith that's at a different pace than our 24/7 world. I love that. I don't want you to hear this wrong, so I'll start out with this. I love the opportunities that are available to us today. If you compare it to most of our history, the opportunities we have today are unprecedented. But if you wanted, you could be in Brazil tomorrow if you wanted. In fact, when I was driving home from the conference in the Brazil mountains, I was thinking to myself, it's crazy to me. I'm driving through the Brazil mountains today, and tomorrow I will be back in Southern California. That's crazy. You can buy something. This actually happened to us a few weeks ago. You can buy something on Amazon at 7:02 a.m. and have it that day. Not just the next day, that day. That just happened to us a few weeks ago. You can catch up on work at 11:07 p.m. if you needed to. You could connect with someone at 3:06 a.m. if you needed to connect with someone at that time. And while those things can be great, it shows that we live in a fast-paced world where things are always on with little to no boundaries. And if we're not careful, we can try to always be on with little to no boundaries. Things like burning both ends of the candlestick just to help or please the boss. Is it important to help or please the boss? Yes, but not to the cost of burning both ends of the candlestick. Or maybe it's responding to others when you need to disconnect, like Martha needed to disconnect to be with Jesus. Or maybe it's helping someone, but there's no boundaries or end in sight. Or it's always saying yes because there's always a need, isn't there? In a world that can be frantic and chaotic, I want my followers to have a faith that paces them. I want them to know that life is meant to be lived as a marathon and not a sprint. I want my followers to slow down, have boundaries, and be with me. Because I also care about their soul, not just what they do for me or for others. Jesus, I just listened to both stories. I'm confused. Which one is it? Loving others by helping them or resting and being with you? A faith that leads me to do or a faith that leads me to be? Which one? Jesus says, yes. Yes. It's both. Jesus invites us to live in the tension of both. Regular rhythms where our faith produces a love, where we think about and help others, and also regular rhythms where our faith produces a value for God and a value for our own soul by slowing down, resting, and being with Him. A healthy Christ follower is someone who lives in the tension of both. And can I tell you, just as a human being and as a pastor, I've seen the one-sided extremes in Christianity, and it can be a trap for people. You have Christ followers, and they just help and serve and serve and help and serve and serve, and you ask them how their relationship with God is going, and all it is defined, well, I'm doing this, and I'm doing that, and I'm doing this, and I'm doing that, and they feel trapped. Because they think the definition of a good Christ follower is to always say yes. You know why I know that? Partially because I've been there. And some of you have heard this before, but it's such a good place to say it again in a message like this. I remember going to my wife once and telling her, I know God is my Father. I know Jesus is my friend. I know that He loves me. But all I feel with God right now is that He's my boss. What happened? I was living in a one-sided extreme where everything was about other people and not as much focused on my relationship with Him or slowing down or resting. Or again, people can go to the other side as well. And you've either have said this before, or if you thought this before, or if you heard someone else say it, okay? It's one of the three. I love God, just don't like people too much. Yep, me and God, wow. His people, yeah, right. Try telling a mother, I love you, just don't like your kids that much. It's not, yeah, some moms in the room, right? It's not going to go over well. In fact, I even joke with my sister at times, just teasing and joking, because I'm the older brother. That's what older brothers do. I joke with her about her kids, and you can start to see the mama bear surface on her. Guys, God's the same way. One way we love God is by loving others. can I say this? If you find yourself on this side of the extreme, there's never, ever, ever been a person that you've met eyes with or that you know or that you heard of that God hasn't created or loved. No one. We can try to justify it. Well, they have different political views. They have different lifestyles. They sin a little bit differently than me, so I get the grace, they get the judgment. No one that you have ever met, laid eyes on, or have seen is someone that God hasn't created or loved. Or some people even take the extreme even farther. It's not even really about them and God. It becomes a self-centered faith where everything's about them. And we've talked about this before at OB1, where it's almost he becomes the genie God. And we only go to him when we need something. God, I need this. God, I need that. I'm struggling here. I'm struggling there. And is there anything wrong with that? No, we just don't want it to be one-sided. Jesus comes along and says, how about living in a freedom where both are lived out? Regular rhythms of being with God and doing good for him. Let me share a couple things from each story that I hope will help us manage this tension. This isn't a problem to solve. This is a tension to manage. Let's start with the Good Samaritan. Now, I don't want to diminish what he did. He did a lot. He did things that nobody else was doing. People were walking by this guy. He did a lot and crossed some huge social barriers like we talked about to love and help this person. But he didn't do everything. And he wasn't this person's everything. He had his boundaries. He didn't even stay with the person 24/7 till they recovered. He actually left while the person was recovering and asked someone else to help as well. Maybe one of the reasons Jesus shares this story is because he knew, listen, this is so important, he knew that the Samaritan represented God's love, but that he wasn't God and he couldn't be all things to all people. And maybe he shared that story because he knows that all of us can represent God's love, but we aren't God and we can't be all things to all people. Jesus wants us to love and help others. But he isn't calling us to a trap that burns us out by over-functioning and trying to be everything for someone or everything for everyone. Now the Martha story. Notice Jesus didn't correct Martha's serving or desire to help. He gently challenged her chaotic and worried soul and then affirmed her sister's better choice to be with him. He saw that Martha's soul was trapped by worry and over-functioning. And he knew that being with him would help Martha win within and be free. Jesus wants us to slow down, rest, and be with him. But he isn't calling us to a trap of self-centered faith where we just think of ourselves and Christianity just becomes about us. There's a freedom when we live in the tension of both. In fact, he knows we'll be more effective in our doing when we're regularly with Jesus. Because as Jesus helps our soul, it helps us love and help others from a place of freedom. I remember hearing this once, and it was just so powerful to me. A person was sharing, they were sharing that they felt like God was calling them to be a spiritual guide to political leaders in D.C. And I'm like, wow, you can't even get like two opposing view regular people to sometimes, come to some guidance. And God's calling you to be a spiritual guide to political leaders in D.C. And he shares the story of how he was overwhelmed by that. Until one day, God spoke to him and said something like this. Hey, if you can meet with me as king, knowing that I'm the one that has all the power, I can give you the strength you need to work with leaders on this earth. What was God saying to him? Simply put, he was saying, I can make an impact within you, which helps you make an impact for others. See, God's desire is that we'd connect with his heart by being with him, and to also be his boots on the ground, showing others his heart by loving and helping them. Living in the freedom of both and. Living in the freedom of being and doing. The next time you hear a message about loving others, remember that Jesus isn't calling you to a life of no boundaries, and you have to feel guilty if you ever say no, or everything's about other people. It's just a reminder that he really has called them to love him and others, so that it doesn't become some self-centered faith. And the next time you hear a message about slowing down, remember that Jesus isn't calling you to stop everything you're doing for others and do a faith that's just about you. It's a reminder that he's called us to live at a pace that includes rest and being with him, because he's God, we're not. And we need our rest, and we need our souls enriched by him. There really is a freedom when we live in the tension of being and doing. Regular rhythms of loving others and slowing down to rest and be with God. It doesn't have to be the seesaw, one-sided extreme. Regular rhythms of both. So as we start to close, I want you to take a moment and set a goal, 2 goals for this week, and they're going to be up on the screen. The first one is this. What is one thing you can do to love someone well? Or for some of you, you're like, I want to start this habit this week. What is one thing I can do to make sure that I'm in regular rhythms of this also being about other people? Because that's what God has asked me. He wants to produce a love in me. And for some of you, the second question, what is one thing you can do intentionally to be with God this week? What is one thing you can do towards this, like, oh man, the pastor talked about this and 3 months have went by and I haven't spent any time. No, what can you do this week to intentionally spend time with him? So I want you to take a couple minutes. You have your notes in front of you. Some of you might want to journal, write some things down. Some of you might want to get out your cell phone and you can, type in some things there. Really ask God about these things. God, what is something I can do this week to love someone well? He knows what your week looks like. He knows what your regular ongoings are going to be. And God, what is one thing I can intentionally do to be with you this week? So why don't you write those things down, take a little time to journal. Pastor Steve is going to give you a couple minutes before he starts. And then ask God, help me to make this happen this week. Because I want to be a Christ follower that's free. I don't want to be trapped by the one-sided extremes. I want to live a faith in the tension of both, where I'm with you, where I'm resting, where I'm allowing you to take care of my soul, but I'm also loving others and making a difference in my world. So Pastor Steve, if you want to give them a couple minutes and then you can close us.